And please, here to, of course, answer any questions. And also, let me, just because it was dark back there, I didn't see Tokes and Wade, who worked so hard on that infrastructure package, and of course Joe and his team, Erica, a remarkable group of leaders at the Department of Finance, and so I just want to thank them for their incredible stewardship throughout, and obviously thank Ann Patterson and Dana Williamson and Abstentia for their hard work and their support. We're having a fun little staff retreat today, or I don't even know if it's a retreat. Everyone's just down the road here, talking about priorities for the next 3.5 years, and we talked very favorably about the work that we did together with the legislature in the last few months, and how that really sets the course for the next few years around accountability and transparency. And I think if there was something that I neglected in my remarks, one of the principles of the work we did with the legislature this year is driving more accountability at the local level. We did it with the transit package, where we added $3.2 billion to that $5.1 billion overall budget. We are looking for new strategies, new relationships to be formed among public transit agencies, recognizing the world's reorganized very differently as it relates to public transit, and of course on homelessness as well. The number one most vexing and challenging issue, affordability, broadly defined housing, and homelessness. So again, thank you to the legislature for their stewardship and leadership in that space. With that, any questions?
Governor, not including the tunnel and the final project or proposal in the way that it started was widely cast as a compromise from your side, but then some from your team had suggested that that wasn't really a priority going into it, and it was more of like a negotiating point, a negotiating tactic. Can you describe that?
I'll leave that to books, and I'll leave that to unsourced gossip. I'm completely committed to this project, if you're referring to the Delta specifically. We made very quick executive decision to move away from the twin tunnels to a single tunnel. We have moved that project with focused intention forward. We got the draft EIR out. I've got a team that's assembled directly to work on it. We're going to see that through. That project is a huge project, one of the largest infrastructure projects of its type anywhere in the country. So it has to go through the appropriate steps and processes. But that commitment is firm. As it relates to the broader package, let me just say this, and I will say this as openly and candidly as I possibly can. If you told me with those 11 bills that we can land the plane on 10 of them when we started, I would I've been rather overwhelmed, and so I am here overwhelmed and grateful for the partnership and support. And I think what you heard, and I didn't see a lot of heads nod in this direction, but only this direction, was a recognition we have more work to do. And that's extraordinary. And that's the spirit, that's the momentum that I want to take from the work we just did and the bills I just signed, because to have that collective recognition and wisdom gives me real confidence in the next few months and years what we could do together.
Does that mean more streamlining around the tunnel project?
I'm committed to that project, deeply committed, not interested to that project. But we'll look across the spectrum. Time value of money, ability to draw down federal funds, $28 billion we identified just in the Infrastructure Act, issues related to the IRA, federal dollars, and that's that package. And of course, the CHIPS and Science Act, $28 billion at risk if California is not more competitive. We heard that directly from Secretary Energy and others. Jennifer Granholm she didn't mince words. She was out here at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group saying California needs to be more competitive in delivering these projects across the spectrum. And if we're going to get the kind of support we need from the federal government, if we're going to compete against 50 states or in a 50-state environment against 49 other states, we're going to have to move fast, but with our values not vandalized, with our values front and center. And so I look forward to working across the spectrum in other areas. Housing, we have more work to do in that space, obviously, and on many of these large infrastructure projects.
Governor, I saw some environmental groups have appealed the federal regulator's decision to go along with you on the Diablo Canyon extension to keep it up and running for another 5 years. This is a two-part question. One, your response to the attempt to appeal that decision, and two, Does this streamlining attempt to maybe speed up that timeline that you had set for Diablo?
Well, I share the goal. Well, I share two goals. I'm not sure it's shared with everybody. That's to keep the lights on. It's often forgotten, that fundamental responsibility. There's a deeper accountability. It's not an intellectual exercise for me. The last 2 years have been challenging in that respect. But I also share the twin goal of shutting that plant down. The only way you can shut it down is to make sure we have reliable, safe, and competitively priced alternatives. And that means we got to move to build those projects. And we've got to remove some hurdles. And so I know there's a purity of thinking that, well, we can live without that, and we can live with rules and regulations that require 9 years of processes and deliver the reliability that people of state deserve. And I just don't see that from the prism of where I'm operating from. But we ultimately share that goal.
Does nuclear power at all have any role?
Well, I'm not ideologically. A lot of people are. I'm not ideologically opposed. That's 9% of our base load in the state of California. It's not insignificant. It's one of the safest plants. Been operating a level of excellence that's unique in this country. Mindful of the importance of maintaining that status. Not naive about that. There's a lot of humility as relates to nuclear. There should be. I'm also very mindful of the new technologies in this space that are coming. And I'm also mindful that the rest of the world is not as advanced on the clean energy side as we are in the United States, particularly here subnationally in California. California is a leader in the green energy space, and for us, our future, I see a different future, but I does not neglect or negate, I think, the consideration of an all of the above as it relates to other jurisdictions considering nuclear in that respect.
Governor, kind of on that topic, lawmakers have been critical of you kind of shoehorning environmental bills into this budget, into this Diablo bill, into the end of session last year. Can you talk about that strategy? Do you feel like you couldn't get it through if it wasn't more expedited?
Well, it's time to decision. These things are now in effect. I mean, I said it to staff. What did it's almost become a mantra. They're all smiling now. I said, I don't have that many summers left as governor. It's a moment in time. A former speaker can attest to that. It goes like that. And I don't want to dream of regretting. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. I feel a deep sense of urgency. I don't want to just come up here and lament about, extreme heat, extreme droughts, extreme weather. I want to actually deliver, not just on goals and ambition, but on projects. And so I'm in a different mindset. There's sort of hard-headed pragmatism. Let's get moving. Let's not just talk about the way the world should be. We got to do the hard work. It's the next phase. And so I'm deeply mindful of that. And, we saw that last year. We did a bunch of incredible work together, the legislature on the climate space, and extended our ambition. And it was critical that we do what we did this year in terms of extending our capacity to deliver on that. And I think you saw that reflectedly. People are at the end of the process. We feel very good about it. But it's process. And, some people are more interested in process. I think we're here celebrating results today.
What do you say to those who say the process lacks transparency, though, and a lack of opportunity to engage more fully?
I mean, engagement and transparency. There was well exampled. It's been well exampled here. We haven't removed any of that. We have some of the most stringent transparency rules and requirements of any jurisdiction in America. 72-hour rules as it relates to bills and amendments. We've sort of led in that space. None of that was fundamentally changed.
Governor, you've consistently, over the course of your governorship, expanded paid leave, paid family leave, and paid sick leave. Are you supportive of legislative efforts that are moving right now to expand California's paid family leave program to include chosen family and to increase the number of sick days from 3 to 7?
Yeah, I want to do more in this space. I've been very vocal about that, and I appreciate the frame of your question, recognizing the work we were able to do incrementally. But it's the art of what's possible with all the other considerations at hand. So broadly speaking, of course, I'm supportive of that specific bill. Those bills, I'm going to be stubborn as it relates to not leaning in on I think the 1,000 or so bills that are remaining. But it comes at a price, and it comes with consideration and cost, politically and otherwise, in terms of just balancing everything out. We were able to do a lot. I've said this 1,000 times. You can't do everything, but you can do anything. And so this year was top priority of the Women's Caucus. You heard Senator Skinner wisely and appropriately highlight their leadership as it relates to child care workers and raising wages. And so we continue to do more for families. We have a parents' agenda that I'll put up against any other in the United States. And paid sick leave is certainly part of that. And we look forward to doing more in the future. We just have to sort of balance those priorities against others in the short term. And when those bills land on my desk, we'll take those considerations very closely to heart.
And then just one other thing on a different note, you spoke today. You really were emphasizing sort of the volatility of the state budget or state tax revenues over the past few years. I remember speaking with you on the campaign trail 5 years ago about how you had a goal to sort of rethink and revisit the tax system. Is that something that's
Senator Hertzberg and I didn't go anywhere. Then we continue to work on it and tweak it. Back to the art of what's possible, what's doable and what is more challenging. I think the challenge there, let's just be candid, is the public is not there. And it's years and years. You saw that. I mean, I could give you the data on that rather overwhelmingly against some fundamental changes. But I do think we need to be considerate. Although it's not just the volatility, and the volatility is your friend. In the last few years, it's been our friend because we've been able to make unprecedented investments, including $52 billion that was preserved in our climate package as an example, a proof point. And when you could stack away those dollars, as we were able to do in the last many years, in reserves, again, volatility is your friend. But you saw just, modest little cold you get as it relates to interest rates and the volatility, how we catch the flu in terms of just how quickly those revenues can decline. So, I think some consideration. I'm not sure in my 3.5 years, how much I can contribute to that, except a lot of ideas that are very sound and I think quite learned, meaning the work that Senator Hertzberg did in this space has been well researched and well considered. California Forward, many other groups, McGruin Institute leading the charge in that space. A lot of other bipartisan groups have made recommendations. We've compared and contrasted what other states are doing on service taxes versus income taxes and what's included, what's not included. A lot of those have been considered, including on the property tax side, as there was an effort by initiative a few years ago to reform that. So this is a very important top subject area, and it also matters in this respect. Excuse the long-windedness, but it's important. One of the most significant impacts to California's tax structure was a tax increase by the Trump administration, by Congressman McCarthy. The Speaker McCarthy and President Trump supported a tax increase on the state of California, many other states, as it relates to the SALT deduction. That had a big impact. That had an impact on some people, impacted their decisions on where to reside or how many months to stay in the state of California. That comes up in 2025. It sunsets. All of those things need to be considered in relationship to any tax conversation in California. What happens federally in relationship to what happens at the state level. We do not live in isolation. It's not an academic exercise. And so I think any future conversations in this space should consider that playing field as well.
Governor, there's a heat wave in the forecast this week. Are you confident the state's grid will be able to handle that this week and the future? And what lessons did we learn ahead of close call last summer?
Well, we learned to be more prepared. We put a strategic reserve together. I want to thank the leadership and the Assembly and Senate for setting that aside and protecting it this year in the budget. Were some tweaks, a lot of discussion in that space. That was important. It allowed us to keep some of these once-through cooling projects going, stubborn. We want to shut them down. But the reality is such that we need to work through and provide more reliability. And that's exactly why this infrastructure package was so important. I mean, it's exactly why we are doing what we're doing and what we advanced here today. So I want you to know that I have short-term confidence, but long-term anxiety if we do not deliver on these large-scale utility scale transitions. So that's why I was pleased to hear there's more appetite for more support in that space and potentially some more reforms.
Quick question on your the MHSA ballot initiative that I know is expected to move through this week. Just on the 10,000 bed timeline. Sorry, this is in the weeds on that. But
No.
is there a set time?
I
Is
guess
there
4.6 or 7 billion reasons that's not in the weeds.
Okay, so
Yeah.
is there a timeline that you would like on counties, local areas establishing those beds?
Well, we have some, you'll see, and I don't, there's a hearing this week, I think. Yeah, today and tomorrow, yeah. And you'll see through that process of engagement, discussion, and deliberation, and public engagement as well, some of the streamlining that is incorporated in that effort as well. Look, you have a mental health crisis. It's well defined in this country. If there's one unifying issue, it's this issue. And not a Republican or Democrat, there's none of us that are 1 or 2 degrees or maybe directly in the mirror every morning impacted by this issue. Exacerbated, obviously, in the last few years, but by no means distinctive as an issue because of the pandemic. This came into the pandemic as one of the nation's great challenges. This state is leading the effort to resolve this, and one of the areas where we led the nation was creating it. And that was done in the 1960s and 70s with our push to deinstitutionalize. And there was a vision that was laid out in the late 60s and 70s that was never fulfilled, was imagined, but it was never realized. And this bond aims to address that. And that's why it's so exciting. And there are a few things, I mean it, and I just want you to know, if this puts a target on this effort, so be it. Bring that on. For years, we've been preparing for this. This is one of the most exciting and significant things we can be doing. And I'm inspired by the work that Dr. Galley and his team have been doing on CalAIM in the integration, whole person care framework, and changing the payment structures and incentives. I was inspired by the work the legislature did on Care Court. I was inspired by the work we did together on the $4.7 billion for 0 to 26 mental health, and the 44,000 counselors we identified in the workforce, and the money we put out over $1 billion just 2 weeks ago on workforce training for healthcare workers. But we have more work to do on beds. And that's what this bond promises and promotes, and doing it with time matter of urgency, meaning expediting the development of these new projects and rehabilitation projects, regional projects, localized, scattered home projects, a very diverse portfolio of considerations.
Governor, how do you respond to criticism about how
Always negatively. I'm sorry. Forgive me.
how do you respond to criticism about how part of your budget plan essentially delaying access to state police certification documents?
For state certification documents?
Police certification.
Oh, is this the post issue?
Yes.
Oh, well, Post was never supposed to be in that business. I don't think we even had one staff person to do it. It was a redundant process. So I'm not aware of that critique. I was just aware of the reform as it relates to the work we did with the legislature in that space.
Mr. Governor, quickly, just on the infrastructure, one more thing. I know when I was with you and the mayor of Villaraigosa and Patterson, you had expressed, I know, frustration about just how long some of these projects were taking.
I think that one's 9+ years. 9 years. Sorry, forgive me. I'm still frustrated. I'm not over it.
And that's exactly what I want to ask you. Just 270 days, to the extent possible, that some of these projects will be held up in court for those environmental reviews. Are you able to just talk about the hope about speeding them up?
Look, 6 months ago, as I said, 6 months ago, we expressed ambition and we expressed urgency. And there was a sense that we can work together with our building construction trade partners, work with some key environmental leaders that were willing to put their reputations out front, and others that were constructive, very constructive behind the scenes. And then that was renewed, that confidence, when we sat down with the budget chairs and we sat down with the leadership that gave us that space and reinforced that there was a pathway. But there was no denying it was going to be a challenge, and no one was over-promising what ultimately, collectively, we could deliver. This was great progress. And with progress comes responsibility to address the critics and their legitimate concerns, and assert that we have more work to do to those on the other side that felt the package needed to be even more ambitious. And so it's both and I'm looking forward to that. But this was a significant step in the right direction. And I should note it was a very, very significant step in this respect that had bipartisan, overwhelming bipartisan support. And that is a good thing and a good sign for all of us. With that, thank you all very, very much for coming out today. Thank you.